Only three things are certain in life: death, taxes, and for extraordinaire CK3 coverage. Given that I have no choice but to provide the latter due to the algorithm's stranglehold on my psyche, I persist. So too do the surprisingly high budget CK3 cinematics apparently, and there is a fair bit of new information mixed in with the most recent trailer that Paradox has provided us with. So I want to break all of the news down piece by piece with respect to your time as a viewer, and dig into some of the deeper developer comments that reveal more beyond this teaser. After all, there is much to do, and new DLC shouldn't keep you from your disturbed family dynasty tree. To keep people up to speed, Roads to Power, or RTP, is the next expansion that is coming to Crusader Kings 3 in the fall. It focuses on improving gameplay in Eastern Rome, or Byzantium, with new Imperial mechanics like estates, which I will get into later, and adds a new start date alongside landless gameplay. There are also flavor additions coming alongside these new changes that add detail to historical events, such as the Fourth Crusade. It has been revealed that Roads to Power is hitting Aegean shores on September 24th, which may come as a surprise to some of you. We knew that the expansion would release Q3 of 2024, but this is at the very tail end of the quarter, and the devs provided further clarification as to why in a post on Paradox Plaza. A lot is riding on this expansion since it is covering such highly requested mechanics. With player numbers holding steady at around 10,000 people daily, a positive reception could do a lot to breathe new air into the modding community with some of the newer features coming in the fall. On the other hand, another poorly received expansion, depending on its numbers, could do more permanent damage to an already low prestige level. To paraphrase the developers here, there is a bigger gap between RTP's announcement and release date so that they can listen to feedback and explain the paid features better. It may come across as needless filler to pad out the video so that I can reach the 8-minute mark and put in ad rolls. It is, but I want you to pay close attention to the wording in particular here because it is fairly important. In my past CK3 coverage, I've talked on end about the current monetization policy for the game and how Paradox is taking a seasonal approach to pushing out paid content instead of releasing DLC one by one like in the past. Because of the new policy, I assume the developers are also pushing things as far back as possible because of Legends of the Dead's poor performance. This is in part speculation, but both the Steam reviews and sudden responses from the developers in the post-release development of Legends were jarring, and I wouldn't be all too surprised if it resulted in changing around the calendar. We saw a similar strategy with Victoria 3 making a blunder by announcing a specific date for Sphere of Influence and then pushing it back a month to quote-unquote polish up. So playing it safe by announcing release dates 4 quarters instead of making the traditional day-by-date makes sense strategically speaking. Additionally, the last expansion had a remarkably short series of developer diaries. I don't want to put words into people's mouths or make sweeping assumptions, but there seems to be an implication that Legends would have been marginally better if more time was taken to explain it. No matter which way you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. Legends of the Dead was a subpar expansion because it was too expensive and the Legend seeds were unimaginative. Royal Court went in the complete opposite direction with a nightmarish amount of diaries, and it still flopped, so I'm not understanding the point here. It's not exactly a one-to-one comparison either, but Stellaris Machine Age had a similar amount of dev diaries and it was received quite positively, and the devs took the time to post a few screenshots where they explained the mechanics for each feature in the dev diaries they posted, so again, not really seeing the point they're trying to make here. But where exactly am I going with all of this yapping? Well, I think the developers may have actually meant it this time in saying that they wanted to take more time to respond to player feedback. What this really entails as more info rolls out, I'm not sure, but I assume it will be the polar opposite of last time where everything was revealed moments before release. Landless gameplay is one of the most anticipated additions to CK3, and for a $30 expansion that also includes regional changes to Greece, Roma Booze could not be in a more precarious position, save for the Fourth Crusade. If this $30 paid content pack fails to deliver, this could very much be a quote-unquote forgetting to lock the gates moment in Crusader Kings history. Royal Court had Royal Courts, and Tours and Tournaments had Tours and Tournaments, as universal mechanics that tied certain features together. The new Estates tab seems to be fairly reminiscent of the tournament screen for the previous $30 expansion, and I imagine that the devs are trying to lean back on Tours for some credibility. After all, it has been the only positively received CK3 expansion thus far. We had some previous information revealed to us about Estates in the last dev diary, and the new trailer features a screenshot of Estates for landless gameplay. Adventurers also don't appear to have factions or councils, but this could change as we receive more information about Roads to Power. I assume there would be some council integration if you are trying to move to a landed position and want to liberate some land from your liege, but this is speculation on my part. Something else that the screenshot revealed was a new resource icon for landless adventurers. There isn't a name for this yet, but the icon appears to be an apple, and I imagine that it has something to do with supplies. As adventurers focus on fulfilling contracts, it stands to reason that money is needed to keep your characters fed. If they simply run out of food or Big Macs, I assume that you will begin to suffer health debuffs that eventually lead to starvation. We've seen another resource icon that seems to be coin-shaped, but I'm not too sure what it is meant to represent exactly. People are assuming it to be influence, but let me know what you think it represents in the comment section. I have to wonder how landless takeovers will work, because I highly doubt you would be amassing concerning amounts of gold and troops without taking some kind of hostile action or raising awareness. There will likely be a few different ways to start off as a counter hire, but they may lean towards making it similar to how Varangian adventurers work. Declare all-out war on a target, and if you win, you take every piece of their territory. For a more peaceful acquisition, there may be ways to meet overburdened lieges and pay them for a piece of their land. This could particularly get interesting if you are creating custom characters with obscure cultures and faiths, and if all is said and done correctly, we could see a massive boost to replayability. Also, there was a degree of speculation surrounding whether or not baronies were playable with the new DLC. Roads to Power makes landless adventurers and admin vassals playable. To clarify, the developers have stated outright that baronies and counties are not playable, which may understandably anger a few players. Adding playable baronies would also presumably double the amount of baronies in the game, and with considerations to performance, I can see why the developers saw this as a huge gamble. Before vanilla CK3 was released, the developers mentioned that they were playing around with baronies, so it's entirely possible that future paid content is dedicated to improve upon them. I imagine that when we inevitably get to a DLC that is centered around republics and theocracies, that it may finally be time to discuss them again. In defense of the developers though, I think that they were right to prioritize adventurers due to having a less constrained format to work with. And I also think it's fair in that to mention China too and a possible Eastern expansion, as the developers have been concerned, again, about performance, so that may also be factored into consideration when it comes to develop more additional paid content for Eastern Asia. This is the last time I'll bring it up, but I'm really curious to see how different admin vassal gameplay is from traditional landed gameplay. We don't know whether or not admin vassals can occupy council titles, or even specific courtier titles like Physician and Sinistral. One big critique I have though is that the Steam page has very confusing terminology on how they play compared to landless adventurers. Adventurers are fairly straightforward. You fulfill contract, get Big Macs, and expand your power base before settling down. Admin vassals rely on governing estates and building your reputation, but they are constricted to playing in Byzantium. On the Steam page, it mentions administrative empires and also mentions the purple, which is synonymous with Eastern Rome, so the wording would be confusing to prospective buyers. What's even weirder is that they actually have clear wording in the mini dev diary post for the trailer reveal, so I hope that this is cleared up in the future. Otherwise, I fear we would fall back into the same pitfalls that Legends of the Dead did with Dynastic Legacies. Now that we're on the topic of governance, the other new system specific to Byzantium is the Imperial Electorate. By using influence as a currency, not only do you get the chance to expand your power base, but you can also skip the court drama and directly elect your preferred successor, which I imagine cuts out some annoying RNG aspects for less interested players. I pray that this isn't too similar to how Unity and elections work in Stellaris, because that system boils down to choosing a successor with one click of a button, and streamlined mechanics are the last reason that I buy an expansion like this. On a more positive note, I am very pleased with the decision to go for a later start date that places Greece in a far more precarious position. 1178 is right on the heel of the Fourth Crusade with a fractured Rome, and it will be a very interesting position to play in with a growing Seljuk threat to the east. Personally, I would have preferred 1081 with the Alexiad, but this would only be a few decades after our current latest start date. I've seen some posters clamoring for 1204, but you only have so much time to expand your territory before the Black Death comes down, and for my taste, it is too close to the end date. A later start date brings a lot of things to other regions outside of Greece. Pagans have a more challenging start as the Catholic Church was just officially established in Sweden, and Poland has been firmly Catholic for several hundred years. At 1173, the Romovans are one of the strongest holdouts against the Church's effort to convert the North, so there are many options for interesting conflicts. You also have a splintered Russian identity to the east with the principalities that are still small and haven't been subjugated by the Mongols yet, so this would probably be a perfect time to start as an adventurer if you wanted to scoop up a smaller realm. Lastly, we don't know how the Cumans will affect start dates in 1178, but there is a lot of potential for interesting events with them as they made a western push to kingdoms like Hungary. I am no history buff by any means, but at this point in time the Cumans are at or near their apex in terms of power and broke apart when the Mongols invaded, which resulted in them scattering throughout Eastern Europe. Despite their strength, to my knowledge, there is not one united Cuman state, but rather numerous disparate tribes that operate in a confederacy. Depending on how development is pursued, I think there's a lot of potential with interactions with the Cumans and how they shape emerging kingdoms like Bulgaria and form temporary military alliances. All of this is opening up and laying the groundwork for an opportunity for an expansion focusing on trade, and at that point, you might as well include republics. In my opinion, if I was directing CK3's development process, I would include a rework to trade routes before creating content focusing on Greece, specifically since Venice is becoming an increasingly involved power at this point in time. As the Seljuks continue to push westward, the Bosphorus Strait is slowly becoming more and more threatened as a valuable trade node between Europe and Asia. Frequent raids from the Cumans also disrupted valuable trade routes, and they even disrupted maritime trade from time to time as they raided Black Sea ports. Something else I'll briefly touch on is the topic of fashion, because some of the commenters have brought up the more glamorous aspects of CK3. I don't know why it is such a point of contention, but the developers chose a perfect time to bring more Greek fashion to the game and tease a release in lieu of Pride Month. With that said, I've never been a stickler for robes or character customization beyond the initial character creator in the first place, but I think some of the criticisms revolving around the newer clothing options is a bit excessive. We still have several months left until this paid content is released, and fashion is probably one of the last things to get fully implemented before launch. But I know very little about the modeling process for garments, so if there are any fashionistas with dev experience watching, please educate me in the comments section. But I've stretched this video out far enough, and thanks for sticking with me up until this point if you did not skip to the end of the video. CK3 has been doing incredible as of late on the channel, and I'd like to know whether or not you'd enjoy watching more. Specifically, do you want to see more Dev Diary coverage? I could even tackle more of the popular mods like Elder Kings if there is enough demand. Really, as long as it is loosely related to Crusader Kings 3, I am game. And that's going to be it for today's video. So if you are new to the channel, I try to upload at least once a month, but I can be fairly chaotic sometimes with my planning. I always post actively on the community tab, memes included, and if you want to find out what I'm up to, that's the best place to look. But thanks for watching, I hope to see you guys later, and that'll be it. Peace.